Hello, Malma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. Here are tonight's news. First, 14 people were feared dead after a nursing home was flooded in western Japan on Saturday as record heavy rains hit the region. The victims were found in cardiorespiratory arrest at the facility for elderly people that was inundated after a nearby river broke its banks, according to Governor Ikuo Kabashima from the western region of Kumamoto. Authorities in Japan use that term before a doctor officially certifies death. The nation's weather agency downgraded rain warnings by one notch from the highest emergency level in Kumamoto and Kagoshima on Kyushu Island, but Prime Minister Shinzo Abe urged local people to be on maximum alert. The Prime Minister ordered 10,000 troops on standby for immediate deployment to join rescue and recovery operations, pledging the central government would do its best to take emergency measures, prioritizing people's lives. Nawasaka Miyahara, a disaster management official for the prefecture, said 2 people were found in cardiorespiratory arrest. Another was missing in landslides in Kumamoto. Public broadcaster NHK said about 100 people had been stranded as roads were cut off by floods and landslides. Kyoto News Agency said 76,600 residents in Kumamoto and Kagoshima were ordered to evacuate their homes. Some train services have been suspended in the region, while more than 8,000 households lost power. Japan is currently in its rainy season, which often causes floods and landslides and prompts local authorities to issue evacuation orders. Meanwhile, a woman has sued the Japanese government over a forced sterilization, and Japan is also will set up COVID-19 test centers near major airports for travelers. Report by Dennis Liu, joining us live. Hello, Dennis.
Hello, Alva.
Good evening.
Yes, in Hamatsu Shizuo, a woman with low vision, filed a complaint Friday against the government of Japan. The lady is demanding for compensation amounting to 33 million yen or $278,000 for letting her undergo sterilization in 1970 by force. Shikomuto, 71, a resident of the central Japan city of Hamamatsu, said, and I quote, "I want the state to apologize. I wanted to have a third child," reporters after filing the complaint. Muto has argued she endured significant mental distress and that 1948 eugenics law was unconstitutional. In Japan, a eugenic law permitted involuntary sterilization of people with intellectual or mental disability from 1948 to 1996, where more than 16,500 women and men were sterilized against their will. Soon after Muto gave birth to her second child in 1977, a hospital told Muto that she might pass an eye disease to a third child and force her to undergo sterilization, according to accusers. Japan's parliament authorized legislation in April 2019 to pay 3.2 million yen state compensation to each person who underwent forced sterilization. Over Japan, there are other 24 complainants that filed similar complaints against the government at various district courts since the first in January 2018. In May last year, it was determined that the law was unconstitutional, but the 71.5 billion yen damages claim filed by 2 other senior women from Miyagi Prefecture, northeast of Japan, was given a cold shoulder. In another complaint filed by a 77-year-old man was disapproved, claiming of 30 million yen damages. The Tokyo District Court in June explaining that the claim was expired 20 years after his surgery was performed in 1957. However, the court did not rule on whether the law was constitutional or not. Meanwhile, the country's borders are still closed to 129 other countries and territories. Japan is now planning to ease international travel rules and restrictions. According to the Japan Times, the government is looking to build new COVID-19 testing centers near major airports of Narita, Haneda, and Kansai. The airport will have testing centers that are expected to be available for travelers when landing in Japan, while the city testing centers could be used by travelers leaving Japan. Japan government is now discussing whether to issue an official certificate for those with negative PCR tests, but the details are yet to be announced. These testing centers would be made available as early as this August this year. Currently, those arriving in Japan must take a polymerase chain reaction or PCR test upon landing at the airport. And in some cases, passengers have waited 4 days to get the results. According to a report, the centers could perform about 4,000 PCR tests in one day. These are the latest for now. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for your updates there in Japan. Stay safe, stay healthy.
You're welcome, Alma. Reporting live from Tokyo, Japan. This is Dennis Lu with Ancient Times.
Thank you, Dennis. U.S. President Donald Trump bemoaned protests demanding racial justice as violent mayhem Friday, but said little about an alarming resurgence of coronavirus cases as he attended a crowded fireworks studied Independence Day celebration beneath majestic Mount Rushmore. Now, President Trump, under fire for his response to America's spiraling coronavirus caseload 4 months before the presidential election, spoke on the eve of the July 4th celebrations before thousands of closely packed people, many of whom chanted for more years, few of whom were wearing masks. Take a look.
Our nation is witnessing a merciless campaign to wipe out our history, defame our heroes, erase our values, and indoctrinate our children. Angry mobs are trying to tear down statues of our founders, deface our most sacred memorials, and unleash a wave of violent crime in our cities.
In the shadow of four notable predecessors to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln, whose likenesses are carved into a granite cliff in South Dakota's Black Hills, the president called on supporters to defend America's integrity. The U.S. has been engulfed by a once-in-a-generation reckoning on racism and police brutality since George Floyd, an African-American man, was killed by a white police officer in Minneapolis on May 25th. President Trump did briefly thank those working tirelessly to kill the virus during his comments on Friday, but otherwise, he has had little to say about the shocking increase in U.S. virus cases. On Friday, a record 57,000 new infections were confirmed, and the surge, especially in the south and west of the country, has cast a pall over Independence Day and seen U.S. residents blacklisted by Britain and Europe who have opened their borders to others. Now, on Friday, U.S. media reported Donald Trump Jr.'s girlfriend, Kimberly Guilfoyle, had tested positive for COVID-19. Kimberly Guilfoyle is a former Fox News television personality who is dating Donald Trump Jr. and had traveled to South Dakota to see the U.S. President's 4th of July speech and celebration fireworks at Mount Rushmore. Guilfoyle, 51, was immediately isolated after discovering she had the virus in a routine test conducted on anyone expected to come in close contact with the president, according to the New York Times. In a statement to the newspaper, Sergio Gore, chief of staff to the Trump campaign's finance committee said, and I quote, "She's doing well and will be retested to ensure the diagnosis is correct since she's asymptomatic." He added, as a precaution, she will cancel all upcoming events. Donald Trump Jr. was tested negative, but as a precaution is also self-isolating and is canceling all public events. She's the third person with close contact to the president to be diagnosed with the virus. Others include President Trump's personal valet and the U.S. Vice President's press secretary. In Florida, where new cases are hovering at around 10,000 daily, Miami's usually crowded South Point Beach was closed on Friday, save for patrolling police and a wandering cat.
I'm a little bit disheartened because I really don't think anybody's ever caught coronavirus at the beach. If they have, I haven't heard any statistics that said, hey, we went to the beach and we caught coronavirus.
I arrived here yesterday night and we heard that the beaches and stuff was closing, but we already had booked our flights and the room, so we really couldn't get any money back. So we just said that we would just come and just enjoy anyway.
Touching almost every country on Earth since it emerged in China late last year, the coronavirus has infected at least 10.9 million and killed 522,000 globally, shattering previously buoyant economies and bringing public life to a standstill. But while Europe and much of Asia have largely managed to bring the virus under control, so much so that England was preparing to reopen pubs, restaurants, and cinemas, in the U.S. it has claimed nearly 130,000 lives amid a sharp resurgence of cases, which top infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci said puts the entire country at risk. The world's largest economy broke its record for new cases for the third day in a row on Friday, with more than 57,000 infections in 24 hours. It's expected to record its 3 millionth infection next week, with cases rising the south and west particularly. Since George Floyd, a black man, died in Minnesota after a white police officer knelt on his neck for more than 8 minutes, people in Australia have been speaking up. This time, Australian Filipinos, or Aussie Pinoys, have joined the protests for Black Lives Matter in Sydney. Here's the report from Carla Cruz.
The Black Lives Matter protests held in the United States prompted countries around the world to hold their own demonstrations against police brutality. Here in Sydney, hundreds of protesters marched the city's main streets on June 6 in response to not only George Floyd's death, but also Indigenous deaths while in police custody. One of those who attended the rally is Danica Gonzalez, an Australian Filipino who is a passionate advocate of social issues.
There were so many people in the city at the time, and we were all very, conscious of other people around us. But at the end of the day, they're dying, and we've already taken so much from them, and it's really important that this issue is addressed, and it's addressed now.
The current pandemic did not deter protesters from attending the historical rally.
Because of the situation that we're in, and we understand how quick coronavirus can spread, I think it was made clear to everyone who wanted to attend, if they didn't feel well that day, or they felt any type of flu symptom, that they stayed home. And that if you did attend, you wore a mask, you brought hand sanitizer.
Danica recalled an important stage during the protests that united the strong numbers in attendance.
There was this one moment where, basically the whole rally, knelt down on the street and, had, a moment of just, silence. Where we're just kneeling there. And I think that's really profound.
As a result, people are starting to notice the role of the police in our society.
So they're there to, create some sort of order, but that just means that they're allowed to do what they've been doing, all this violence, all this murdering. And especially in the US, most of these people are being shot to death, being unarmed. There were a couple more Indigenous lives that were lost in police custody, and that just goes to show that even though, you know, we do something like as big as this, you know, it's still going to be a thing that's ongoing.
And if you're looking to learn more about the Black Lives Matter movement, a good place to start is within yourself.
Good to like dig into your history, dig into the history of, you know, colonization, because that's basically where all this racism does stem from.
Black Lives Matter is more than just a hashtag. It's a real opportunity to bring about a significant social change in the Black and Indigenous communities so current and future generations do not face the same racial injustice. Reporting from Sydney, Australia, Carla Cruz, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Canada on Friday suspended its extradition treaty with Hong Kong to protest the tough new national security law China has enacted in the financial hub. The Foreign Ministry said Canada is also halting exports of sensitive military gear to Hong Kong and updating its travel advisory for the city so Canadians will know how the law might affect them. Take a look.
Before I get started, I want to address the troubling news coming out of Hong Kong. Canada joins the international community in expressing its grave concern with the passage of national security legislation for Hong Kong by mainland China. After studying the legislation and its impact, Canada will treat exports of sensitive goods to Hong Kong in the same way as those destined for mainland China. Effective immediately, Canada will not permit the export of sensitive military items to Hong Kong. We are also suspending the Canada-Hong Kong extradition treaty and updating our travel advisory for Hong Kong. Canada is a firm believer in the one country, two system framework. We will continue to support the many connections between Canada and Hong Kong while also standing up for its people. In the days and weeks to come, we're also looking at additional measures, including around immigration.
The Chinese legislation enacted this week outlaws acts of subversion, secession, terrorism, and colluding with foreign forces. Beijing has faced a groundswell of criticism, primarily from Western nations, over the law, which radically increases China's control over Hong Kong. China's leaders say the suit of powers will restore stability after a year of sometimes violent protests and will not stifle freedoms. But police have already begun arresting people for possessing protest flags and banners. And the government in Hong Kong has made clear certain political views, especially calls for independence, are now outlawed. Relations between Canada and China have been tense because of extradition proceedings underway against an executive of the Chinese telecoms giant Huawei, who is wanted in the U.S. on suspicion of violating sanctions against Iran. Prime Minister Trudeau recently rejected calls for him to intervene and trade that executive Mang Wanzhou for two Canadians held in China on espionage charges. Mang was arrested in Canada in December of 2018 at the request of U.S. authorities. The two Canadians, former diplomat Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, a consultant and businessman, were arrested in China just days later. Their detention is considered in the West as retaliation for Mang's arrest, a claim Beijing has repeatedly denied. Books written by prominent Hong Kong democracy activists have started to disappear from the city's libraries, online records show, days after Beijing imposed a draconian national security law on the finance hub. Take a look. Among the authors whose titles are no longer available are Joshua Wong, one of the city's most prominent young activists, and Tanya Chen, a well-known pro-democracy lawmaker. Beijing's new national security law was imposed on Tuesday and is the most radical shift in how the semi-autonomous city is run since it was handed back to China by Britain in 1997. China's authoritarian leaders say the powers will restore stability after a year of pro-democracy protests, will not stifle freedoms, and will only target a very small minority. But it has already sent fear coursing through a city used to speaking openly, with police arresting people for possessing slogans pushing independence or greater economy for greater autonomy, and businesses scrambling to remove protest displays. Now, Wong said he believed the removal of the books was sparked by the security law. And Beijing's new national security law for Hong Kong is the most radical shift in the semi-autonomous city, is one since it was handed back to China by Britain in 1997. A key pillar of Hong Kong's success has been an independent judiciary insulated from mainland China's party-controlled courts and their conviction rates of around 99%. Now that legal firewall has now come down. The law grants China jurisdiction in some national security cases and allows mainland security agents to set up shop openly in the city for the first time. Those personnel are not bound by local laws. Local police have been granted broad surveillance powers that do not require judicial oversight, while trials involving state secrets can be held behind closed doors without juries. Hong Kong normally passes its own laws through a legislature. Also embeds mainland officials within Hong Kong's government. A new National Security Commission is headed by the head of Beijing's liaison office and staffed by both mainland and local officials. Article 22 of the Basic Law says the central government cannot interfere in the running of Hong Kong. But Beijing has made clear national security trumps that and is the central government's purview. On Thursday, the government confirmed that one of the city's most popular protest chants, "Liberate Hong Kong, Revolution of Our Times," was now banned. The impact of the law on people's speech has been visible both digitally and physically. Some restaurants and businesses have removed political displays after warnings from police. Online, meanwhile, people have scrubbed chat groups and anonymized their social media accounts or deleted them entirely. China also claims universal jurisdiction that could make it risky for Beijing critics, including foreigners, to travel to Hong Kong or through its airport. All right, let's get the latest situation in Ireland, where the Prime Minister is in waiting finally to get his turn. Joining us live is Rowana Bianca Arino. Hello, Rowana.
Hi, Alma. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. How are you doing?
I'm very well as well. So for my updates here in Ireland, Fianna Fáil leader Micheál Martin has selected Saturday as Ireland's new Prime Minister, replacing Leo Varadkar as the country's Taoiseach during a special sitting of the Dáil Parliament. Martin's selection follows months of negotiations between his centre-right party, Fine Gael, and the Green Party, to reach an agreement following elections in February before the onset of the coronavirus crisis. The 59-year-old political veteran said the most immediate issue facing Ireland was the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. These challenges include affordable housing, hospital waiting times, and climate change. Ireland also faces the economic fallout from the virus, as well as a potential no-deal Brexit. The new Prime Minister is appointed by Ireland's President Michael D. Higgins. Let's listen to the newly elected Prime Minister speaks.
Which has been agreed. Tá 93. Neil, 63. There were 3 abstentions. That means that the motion is carried, and the Dáil has agreed to nominate Deputy Micheál Martin for appointment by the President to be Taoiseach.
There is no question what our most urgent work is. We are meeting away from our permanent chamber because of a historic pandemic which has struck Ireland and the rest of the world. As of today, 2,278 people on this island have lost their lives. Many thousands more have fought a long struggle to recover. There is no community, no part of our country which has escaped untouched. Too many of our people cannot find a decent and affordable place to live. Waiting times for urgent treatments are far too long. Our communities, our families, our young people need support to be able to thrive in a rapidly changing modern economy. And we must tackle the existential crisis posed by climate change. Recovery and renewal. These are the themes which underpin everything in the programme for government, which has been agreed between Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the Green Party, and has been ratified by our members with overwhelming majorities. Our three parties come from very different traditions. We do not and could not be expected to agree on everything. However, we have been able to agree on core democratic principles and on a balanced and comprehensive programme.
So to complete the report, among Martin's ministerial nominations, Fine Gael leader Radker was named Taoiseach, or Deputy Prime Minister, and the head of the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. Green Party leader Eamon Ryan is set to lead offices of climate change and transport, as incumbent Foreign Minister Simon Coveney, who led the Republican Brexit talks, was named to remain in the office. Incumbent Finance Minister Paschal Donohoe is also due to remain in post as he runs as a candidate to head to Eurogroup, which brings together the Eurozone finance ministers. But key housing and healthcare portfolios were taken from senior Fine Gael figures after the party was rooted at the election for its failures in those arenas. There's no time for quietly settling in. Every minister has a substantial role to play, as Martin said. He takes over from centre-right Radker in a historic reconciliation of Ireland's two major parties and sworn political rivals, which dates back to the foundation of the state a century ago. Radker said the agreement meant that today civil war politics ends in our parliament. Two great parties coming together with the Green Party to offer what this country needs, a stable government for the betterment of our country and for the betterment of our world. Under the agreement, Fine Gael is set to regain the post of Taoiseach at the end of 2022. Back to you, Alma.
Okay, so from your report, it seems that one of the parties, the Sinn Féin, excluded from the seats. What is the impact and how has the reaction been?
So, with the two centre-right parties needed to support of the Greens to have a working majority in the Irish Parliament, their collective total adding up to 85 seats in the 160-seat chamber. Fianna Fáil won the most seats in February's election, 38, while Fine Gael received 35 seats and the Greens 12. Green Party leader Eamon Ryan spoke of difficult decisions ahead for the coalition, especially with regards to the economy. The political deal notably excludes Republican Sinn Féin from power. The one-time Fringe Party won the popular vote with 24.5% of first preference ballots and claimed 37 seats to become the second largest force in parliament and is expected to become the main opposition party. The coalition deal has prompted anger among Sinn Féin members and the party's leader Mary Lou MacDonald, who told Parliament that the coalition was born out of necessity and not of ambition. She called February's vote the change election and said people had given her party a mandate to be in government because they voted for progress and a new direction in Irish politics. Faced with the prospect of losing their grip on power, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have circled the wagons, she added. Overall, Sinn Féin was not very pleased. Alma.
All right, thank you very much, Rowana, for your update there in Ireland. Stay safe and stay healthy always.
Thank you, Alma. I'm Rowana Biancarino, correspondent in the Republic of Ireland, and we live in interesting times.
Eagle News, we'll be right back. Welcome back. The Swiss government announced that from July 6, passengers on public transport will now have to wear face masks. Bringing that report and joining us live is Jim Hipolito. Hello, Jim.
Good evening, Alma.
Good evening from
Yes,
Manila. Yes.
Here is the latest from Switzerland. Wearing a face mask on public transport will become compulsory following a resurgence in COVID-19 cases in a country that had largely got the virus under control. The rule applies to people aged 12 and above. Switzerland fully reopened its borders on June 15 and said the rise in cases was due to infected people entering the country. Also, anyone entering Switzerland from risk areas will now have to undergo a 10-day quarantine. The number of cases in Switzerland had been at a low and stable level for weeks, but began to tick upwards in the second half of June as the wealthy nation lifted most of its remaining lockdown restrictions. Currently, wearing a mask on public transport is recommended rather than compulsory. Switzerland, which has lifted many of its lockdown restrictions, has registered a total of over 32,000 positive tests for COVID-19 so far, while 1,965 people have died. But the number of infections has started to again increase since mid-June, triggering concerns about a second wave. After improvement to the coronavirus situation on June 15, the government allowed travel between Switzerland and all European Schengen states, as well as Iceland, Norway, Liechtenstein, and the United Kingdom. On July 20, citizens from the following countries deemed as safe will be able to enter Switzerland, Algeria, Australia, Canada, Georgia, Japan, Morocco, Montenegro, New Zealand, South Korea, Rwanda, Thailand, Tunisia, and Uruguay, as well as the European Union states not belonging to the Schengen area, Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, Ireland, and Romania. China will also be added to the safe list in accordance with European Union recommendations, provided that reciprocity is guaranteed to Swiss residents according to the Swiss government. In order to prevent and slow down the spread of the virus as much as possible, people known to be affected have been isolated in Switzerland. The government reintroduced a strategy of contact tracing in May. This means that anyone who has been in close contact with a sick person, in other words, less than 2 meters away for more than 15 minutes, must also remain in quarantine for 2 weeks. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much for your updates there in Switzerland. Looking forward for more. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you, Alma. Reporting live from Geneva, Switzerland. This is Jim Hipolito, and we live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, more young people are being tested positive for COVID-19. Joining us live from Spain is Beverly Madrid. Hello, Beverly. Okay, meantime, let's go first to Catalonia, still in Spain. It's the northeastern part of Spain. The Catalonia region on Saturday locked down an area with around 200,000 residents near the town of Lerida, following a surge in cases of the new coronavirus. Now, this move came as the summer holiday started in Spain and the country began readmitting foreign visitors from 12 countries outside the European Union. Now, it had already opened its frontiers to people from the EU's visa-free Schengen zone and Britain on June 21. Regional Health Minister Alba Vergés said gatherings of more than 10 people and visits to retirement homes would be banned. Spain has been one of the countries worst hit by the coronavirus pandemic, with 28,385 deaths, Europe's fourth highest toll after the United Kingdom, Italy, and France. Now, on Friday, it registered 17 virus deaths within 24 hours, its highest daily COVID-19 toll since June 19. The number of cases now stands at 250,545 in a country of 47 million. Tens of millions of more people are likely to go hungry this year because of the COVID-19 crisis. That is according to the UN World Food Program, as it announced plans for a massive boost to its global aid operation so it can reach them. In an alert, WFP head David Beasley said that new estimates show that 270 million people face food insecurity before the year's end.
Well, the COVID pandemic is creating a hunger pandemic. In fact, we've gone from now 135 million people on the brink of starvation to 270 million people. And while we've got to have a vaccine for COVID, we do have a vaccine for hunger and starvation, and that's the World Food Program. So we need support right now, and if we don't get that support, you can imagine death rates, starvation, mass migration by necessity, and exploitation by extremist groups. We've got the vaccine, we need the food, we need to move it now.
The crisis unfolds at a time when the number of severely food insecure people in the world had already risen nearly 70% over the past 4 years, compounding the effects of climate change, conflict, and socio-economic shocks in regions of the world that had previously escaped severe levels of food insecurity. The fallout from the pandemic is being felt hardest in Latin America, which has seen an almost threefold rise in the number of people requiring food assistance, and among urban communities in low and middle income countries, which are being dragged into destitution by job losses and a precipitous drop in remittances. Spikes in hunger are also evident in West and Central Africa, which has seen a 135% jump in the number of food insecure people, as well as in Southern Africa, where there has been a 90% rise. Coronavirus infection levels are climbing at the very moment when food stocks in some parts of the world are already low. And at this time of year, many farmers are awaiting crops from new harvests. Hurricane and monsoon seasons are getting underway, while record locust invasions in East Africa and outbreaks of conflict are adding to an already challenging outlook for the world's hungry. Eagle News will be right back. Welcome back. More young people are testing positive for COVID-19. Joining us live from Spain is Beverly Madrid. Hello, Beverly.
Hello, Alma. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, good to see you. All right, so your update there in Spain.
Yes, infection spread through younger people, causing the severity of coronavirus cases in Spain to fall. Fernando Simon, the director of the Health Ministry's Coordination Center for Health Alerts, or CCAES, explained that the profile of the new infections are increasingly young. At the beginning of May, the average age of detected cases was over 60. New cases currently are being found at an average of 47 in men and 50 in women. Now, they are milder because the vulnerable groups are more protected. He added that the majority of new infections are being detected among healthy and young people who are of working age. The elderly and people with pre-existing conditions, which are the most vulnerable part of the population, are likely to taking more care and are less exposed to infection. The Health Ministry's released report on pandemic shows that there were 297 cases with symptoms detected in the last week and 134 cases diagnosed on Wednesday, many of them asymptomatic. Simon also described the situation in Madrid and Barcelona a little strange because despite having large populations, they are not reporting new outbreaks. He also said that, "I think that we are doing a very good job in detecting cases, but we know that we are not detecting 100% of them." Back to you, Alma.
you stay safe and you stay healthy there in Spain, and looking forward to for more updates from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma. Reporting here from Barcelona, Spain. I'm Beverly Madrid, and we are living in interesting times.
Indeed. The impact of COVID-19 on jobs has been much worse than expected, according to the International Labor Organization, and in an appeal to governments, workers, and employers to support a sustainable and fair economic recovery plan. The ILO said that the world is not likely to be in better shape by the end of 2020 than it was before the health crisis. Let's listen in.
But I think the first piece of news, and it's a bad piece of news, is that the situation is worse than we had previously estimated for the first half of this year, which is now coming to an end. Our latest estimate is for the loss of the equivalent of 400 million full-time jobs. That's up from 305 million in our estimate of 1 month ago. And this reflects the fact that the pandemic is really hitting hard, particularly in the Americas, in the developing world in general, but in the Americas. Even the best scenarios, none of them takes us back to the situation where we started the year. There will be considerable loss of jobs and employment and through to the end of this year, and that's really a worry. We take a particular look at the situation of women. Perhaps counterintuitively, most times when you get a downturn in the economy, women don't suffer as much as men. Men get shaken out of the labour market more quickly because they tend to work in sectors which are closely linked to the economic cycle. Different this time. Women are concentrated in the sectors which have been most hit by the pandemic. They're very well, heavily represented in domestic work, in the frontline health and social care sectors, and this burden of unpaid care, which is always the prerogative of women, has been intensified by the pandemic. So we run the risk of losing the albeit modest gains in gender equality that we've recorded in recent years. So how do we sequence and balance the health and the social and economic policy responses to the pandemic? How do we sustain the enormous effort of stimulus that the world has put in up until this point as debt begins to rise? How do we do better in international cooperation? Because, you know, at the risk of exaggerating, each country has looked after itself so far. We need to help those who are least able to bring the resources to bear. How do we make sure that social dialogue and respect of rights is taken seriously in all of this? And finally, how do we build back better? How do we create that better future of work, a fairer one where the vulnerable and the hardest hit are given priority attention? That was the aim of our centenary in the Future of Work initiative. It mustn't get swept away by this pandemic. In fact, it's needed more than ever because of this pandemic.
New data from the ILO shows that working hours fell 14% during the second quarter of this year from April to June, equivalent to the loss of 400 million full-time jobs. Last month, the agency pointed to a likely loss of around 305 million jobs. Regionally, people in the Americas have been worst hit, with working hours down 18.3%. The United Nations Secretary General termed the COVID-19 pandemic as not only a humanitarian crisis, but also one which has turned into a development and financial crisis for many developing economies. Take a look.
The COVID-19 pandemic and the global recession it has triggered are, of course, causing immense human suffering around the world. And unless we act now, we could face years of depressed and disrupted economic growth. Those who suffer most will be the less equipped to respond. Extreme poverty and hunger are set to increase drastically. Healthcare systems in many countries are already at breaking point, and a generation of children is missing out on their education. We are on the cusp of a widespread debt crisis, with many countries faced with an impossible choice between servicing their debt or protecting their most vulnerable communities and fighting the pandemic. And debt defaults can have devastating social consequences. And many countries simply do not have access to financial markets to be able to service their debt. Uncertainty and a further retreat to inward-looking policies and protectionism could turn today's sharp decline into a prolonged period of weak external financing. Moreover, as the pandemic disrupts supply chains and trade, there is a danger that some manufacturing will move back to developed countries, further reducing developing countries' resources and raising fundamental questions about their integration into the global economy. These questions need bold and creative answers.
I think the first thing that we need to do for many countries is using this crisis to pressure or to pursue more ambitious reform, whether this is on education, health, social safety net, or quality of spending.
In rebirthing, we need to break the inequality and environmental degradation enchantment that darkens the horizon. The new global economy must be based on sustainable consumption and production, on sustainable infrastructure, one that gives access to all the opportunities of the future. And the transformation cannot stop there. We need to transform our institutions, both public and private, to ensure that democracy and markets are accountable to people, to key stakeholders. Globalization and liberal markets have failed us on many fronts, and we don't have an alternative paradigm. We need to co-create one that is based on putting people and the planet at the center of the work that we do. And we need to do it now for the next generation. Pandemics, acute inequality.
More than 180 stranded Filipinos affected by the pandemic were repatriated in Thailand. Ian Celada was at the scene.
Sawadee-krap. 183 Filipinos in Phuket and neighboring provinces in Thailand joined a repatriation flight organized by the Philippine Embassy in Bangkok in partnership and with the assistance of the Filipino communities in Phuket.
Ang Phuket po ay roughly 900 kilometers away from Bangkok. So yun yung isang challenge, no? Tapos it's a 13-hour ride, no? And because flights are not yet normal, no? We traveled by land. The embassy team traveled by land to Phuket to make sure that we're here on time, no? We're here to be of service to our repatriates, our Filipinos in Phuket who have been waiting for so long for a flight back home. Nauna na po kasi the first 3 flights, nauna po ay ang Bangkok, no? Merong ilan from Phuket who were on those flights, but the great majority of Filipinos in Phuket were under lockdown for 2 months here. And so they missed the opportunity to go home for the first 3 flights. That's 2 government repatriation flights and a flight chartered by a Filipino-Thai company back home that we helped facilitate. So the situation is that for the next month, wala pa rin pong international flights out of Thailand, no? Merong ilan siguro, but only repatriation flights are viable at the moment. That's why the Philippine government's repatriation program, as our beloved Secretary of Foreign Affairs Theodore Locsin Jr. says, continues to be in service for our stranded kababayans abroad. Not just in Thailand, of course, but also in other countries. So, ako'y nagpapasalamat sa ating Filipino community here in Thailand because they are the ones who actually, kept following up for this flight to happen. The Filipinos here work as employees in hotels and resorts, and we all know that all around the world, the tourism sector has been really adversely affected by the pandemic, and such is the same situation here. So we have, the loss of jobs of our kababayans, and that's why, even if there are flights, very, very few flights available out of Thailand via the Middle East or via Seoul, ang mahal-mahal po. So this is their only, this is their only hope really to be able to go home. So we have realized that hope today. Hopefully, in the next few weeks, we can continue serving our kababayans with flights, with repatriation flights. Of course, that is only possible with the partnership of our Philippine government agencies back home, as well as the Filipino communities in the different provinces here in Thailand. So maraming salamat po at mabuhay po tayo lahat.
Nagbigay sa amin ng pag-aasa na makauwi kami lahat. Sa mga tumulong sa amin, nag-asikaso, governments and the people na tumulong kay Miss Lea and kay Miss Sheena na nag-asikaso sa amin lahat dito. Maraming salamat kasi hindi kayo nag-give up, tapos hindi rin kayo nagdalawang isip na tulungan pa at maghanap pa ng maraming tao na matutulungan para makauwi.
All passengers receive an email stating do's and don'ts once they arrive at Ninoy Aquino International Airport. This repatriation flight might be the end of their journey here in Thailand, but definitely will give hope and restart the new normal life together with their families. Reporting from Phuket, Thailand, this is Ian Silada, and we live in interesting times.
Major League Baseball officially canceled its 2020 All-Star game on Friday, the first time since World War II that the mid-season showcase has been scrapped. The exhibition was scheduled for July 14 at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles, and MLB said the Dodgers would now host instead in 2022. The 2021 edition has already been awarded to the Atlanta Braves. MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred thanked the Dodgers for their work in preparing for the game and for being patient and understanding in navigating the uncertainty created by the pandemic. California has seen a 92% increase in COVID-19 cases this week compared to 2 weeks ago. The July 14 date would have put the All-Star game during teams' preseason training camps in preparation for a delayed, shortened season due to the pandemic. A 60-game regular season to be followed by playoffs is expected to begin July 23 to July 24. Since its inception in 1933, the All-Star Game had been a summer staple every year except 1945, when wartime travel restrictions forced its cancellation. Eagle News will be right back. The Louvre in Paris, the world's most visited museum and home to the Mona Lisa, reopens on Monday, but with coronavirus restrictions in place and parts of the complex closed to visitors. Take a look. Its director, Jean-Luc Martinez, said the Louvre has been closed since March 13, and this has already led to losses of over 40 million euros. Among more than 10 million visitors in 2018, almost 3/4 were tourists. Visitors will have to wear masks, there will be no snacks or cloakrooms available, and the public will have to follow a guided path through the museum. Positions have been marked in front of the Mona Lisa, where tourists routinely pose for selfies to ensure social distancing. France contributes 100 million euros to the Louvre's 250 million euro annual budget, and the museum must make up the rest, according to experts. 70% of the museum's public areas, or 45,000 square meters, about 485,000 square feet, will be open to the public. The Louvre has upped its virtual presence during the lockdown and said it was now the most followed museum in the world on Instagram, with over 4 million followers. Mr. Martinez is planning a revamp of the museum ahead of 2024, when Paris hosts the Olympic Games. In other news, while the mango is known as the king of fruits in India, it's surely getting the royal treatment in Dubai, where the fruit is being delivered in a Lamborghini.
Basically, the idea of the Lamborghini was just to make the kids happy because of the pandemic and the virus all around the world. The kids have been locked up in the house for far too long. So in UAE, alhamdulillah, the virus is it's equal to none. Cases are very low. So because of that, we are allowed to go outside. So because of this, we wanted to do something good for the community. Their expressions are beautiful, priceless, and their expression is our success. Their happiness is our success. It's not about the money. It's about making the children happy. And we also let the kids ride in the Lamborghini. Once we arrive, they take the pictures, videos for Instagram, Snapchat, all the social media. Once that's over, we let the kids ride in the Lamborghini as well, so that they can experience what it is like to ride in a supercar.
We couldn't believe it, because mangoes in a Lamborghini is something which we couldn't think of. But it's a great combination, and I think it's a great way to market a product from our home country, and I think it's wonderful, and it's amazing.
Now, Jihan Zeb launched a campaign to spread a message of love in the Gulf Emirate by offering a short joyride in the supercar after delivering a minimum order of 100 Emirati dirhams, about $27 for more than half a dozen varieties of Pakistani mangoes. Ever since the campaign has started, Dubai residents have poured in their responses to the supermarket's offer. The supermarket's Facebook page is flooded with inquiries about the price of the mango and whether the ride is included in the price. And finally, in our news, the Iglesia Ni Cristo Church of Christ holds a blood drive in Bakersfield. Reporting from Los Angeles, here's Love Esteban Sanchez.
This is Love Esteban Sanchez reporting from Bakersfield, where the Church of Christ held a community blood drive donation during this pandemic time. Despite these times of quarantine and protests, we arrived at their chapel compound for this blood drive and found a happy and giving spirit among church members. For today's event, how many people came in today and donated?
We have 25 that signed up to donate. We have actually about 5 walk-ins, and I'm getting calls that there's going to be a lot more coming in.
Would adaptations related to the pandemic adversely affect blood donation?
The need right now is very high. With the COVID, a lot of people don't want to risk themselves by going out and donating. But in reality, we do need blood. We are safe. If you're not sick, you are eligible to donate with us. We are taking every measurement that we can to stop and spreading the COVID-19 for patients, for our donors, and our staff members. The pace has changed a lot. We are really slow at both locations, offices, and our blood drives.
Why host a blood drive during this time? Is the need greater now than before with COVID-19? We asked Oliver R. Canlas, Assistant District Minister of the District of Los Angeles County, California, to elaborate as to why the church mobilized to meet this need.
The Iglesia Ni Cristo Church of Christ, through the leadership of our beloved Executive Minister, our dearest brother Eduardo Manalo, continues to teach us the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, that to love God with all our might, with all our mind, with all our soul, is the first and greatest commandment. And the second commandment is like this: love your neighbor as you love yourselves.
As donors arrived at their scheduled staggered times during the event, we wondered about the safety of donating and receiving blood as the coronavirus infection rate continues to grow.
Even now, we have signs everywhere. We have hand sanitizers. Everyone is wearing masks, pretty much. I have my mask on. So yes, we're following all the guidelines that's being implemented right now. It was actually pretty easy and fast. So they're doing everything electronically now. So there is a questionnaire that you can do online with the link. You email the answers to your email, and then they scan the barcode. They check your vital signs, and they just poke you, and that was it. It took probably the whole process no more than half an hour. With the COVID-19 that's going on right now, of course we have to practice the social distancing. Normally, if we didn't have the pandemic, there would be a lot more brethren out here. There would be a lot of food, but I think that's one of the major differences this time around is the socializing. It's more limited.
One of the modifications that we had to do is a lot of donors fear being there too long. So what they can do is they can answer the questionnaire at home the day of their donation. They can email them to themselves, or they can print the questionnaire with the barcode. Yes, you probably are adding about 20 to 30 minutes extra just because we do have to practice social distancing. We cannot have our rooms full. We do have to skip our beds. We do have to skip screening rooms. So we're averaging 30 minutes to donate now to an hour just to donate blood. But we do have donors that understand and are willing to wait that time.
So for those that are donating today, should they have any concerns regarding getting COVID from their donation?
No, they should not worry. We are disinfecting everything. Our staff is required to wear masks and gloves. Anything that the donor touches and the staff member touches, they are disinfecting everything. So the chance of you getting COVID donating blood at our facility or a blood drive are very low risk.
If you were to receive blood, would you be able to get the COVID from the blood that would be given to you?
No, COVID is not transmitted through blood transfusions.
We were reminded of the regular benefits of blood donation and also learned about an added advantage for donating during this time of COVID-19.
It's great for the community, especially during this time of the year when the blood bank is really low in supply. So they welcome a lot of donors. There's many hospitals here locally that need the blood.
So for the plasma convalescent, if a patient has had COVID and they have healed and are feeling well and healthy, they can come and donate plasma. And that plasma has special antibodies that they built when they had the COVID. Now we're going to give that plasma donation to a recipient in the hospital who is currently fighting the COVID. And they're pretty severe, so that's why they need that plasma transfusion, so those antibodies can help with the treatment and battle the COVID-19.
In Bakersfield, California, this is Love Esteban Sanchez reporting for Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
In time of physical and emotional distance, we give importance to the unsung service delivered by our frontliners, our news correspondents positioned all over the world. Without them, we would not have the eagle-eye focus on the facts of this pandemic and its continuing repercussions on our lives. To our international correspondents, thank you for staying in touch with our viewers. Stay safe, protect yourselves and others. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.